It's a lot of time. We really appreciate it. And she just raved about this program and how it's such a cool opportunity for our students to have at our school. Not only do we see a big growth academically in the students, but even socially, get to interact with people other than, the little bubble of school. I just want to say a big thank you. We look forward to continuing this program into the future and all of the support you've given our students. So thank you.
We next have the opportunity to hear from Randy Miller, who is the principal at Franklin. Randy's been in the school district for 25 years as a teacher and administrator. He was the principal at Ensign Elementary and then at Riley, and he was an assistant at different places, and now he's I think it's the third year at Franklin. So we'll hear from Randy, and then afterwards we will have the opportunity to hear from Dr. Mikkel Withers. He grew up in Salt Lake City and attended public city schools and graduated from South High School, where he was the student body president. He began his teaching career right out of high school as a Chapter 1, now called Title I, tutor at Bryan Intermediate School, and the following year as a VISTA worker with at-risk youth. His first full-time teaching assignment was in Granite Alternative High School, working with students who had not been successful in traditional high school setting. He worked for 27 years in the Granite School District and held various positions, including a teacher, counselor, alternative coordinator, prevention specialist, student services, junior school principal, high school, and assistant superintendent. 2003. ASA 2009 Utah State Superintendent of the Year, community of carrying outstanding principle for his work with children and participated in various community educational efforts focused on improving our communities and better our young people. Dr. Withers, Board of Directors for West Ed, the Board of Governors for the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce, AASA, and his school.
Fourth on the list is everybody steals your material prior to getting up here, so I'm reworking everything I was going to say, but mainly want to echo Avery's thoughts. Thank you so much. It was amazing to see about half of the people in this room stand up when they asked anybody that had been involved with something at Franklin this year, and I know there are many more things besides the tutoring program. We have 25 tutors who come weekly. Every week, some are there at about 7:30 in the morning. Most are after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And it's such a great feeling in our building to see those people walk in, those tutors, they all check in at the office. I've said this before, but we have Mr. Wonderful over here. He walks in with a big smile to our receptionist in the office, Miss Christina, and they're Mr. and Miss Wonderful to each other. Christina, when you ask how she's doing, she's always awesome. It's an amazing day. And that's just the type of feeling we have at Franklin. We have so many people, and I know that the tutors who come into our building regularly can echo these thoughts. There's so many people come into our building and just appreciative of the atmosphere we have there. We have a unit at our school that serves several other elementary schools for students with behavioral issues that need some extra support. And they come to our school from other schools, and we had a new student come in a few months ago into that program, and he walked into the school, and this is a 6th grade student walking in, and he told his principal that he was leaving. What a nice school he was coming to. I felt a little for her, but and he didn't say anything rude about the school he was leaving, but he was being very complimentary and letting his principal know that he was going to be fine coming to our school. And then he appreciated the atmosphere, and he recognized that as an 11 or 12-year-old student. He recognized the atmosphere and the positive climate that we and it starts right when you walk. So I think that, and I appreciate and the volunteers that other that aren't able to computer on a basis. Many of you have contributed or helped out South for Santa. That helps about a dozen of our families each year. Mr. Schwing takes care of that every year, and wonderful help and support for the families in our neighborhood. A career day that's set up by members of the Rotary, and they bring speakers in that are Rotary members or find other people. And the students love that. They love to go out on trucks and see the trucks and hearing about the work and aviation careers that many have. And what I really liked was hearing Kayvon and Isaac and their message. You were to talk to the other 23 kids who are sitting here right now, the message would be similar. Help with their academic homework, but Isaac said he wanted to make friends. And that's far more important. They get academic help all the time through school, but to have someone take time from their busy day and their busy lives, half an hour a week with them, can't be measured in their lives. Isaac is in sixth grade. He's inspired to go to college now. I'm going to put the students on the spot. By a show of hands, how many of you have been inspired in some way? I'm not going to ask you specifically, but inspired to do something different based on your relationship with your tutor. So I'm asking the students this question. Just raise your hands. So I see pretty much every hand going up. Been inspired in some way to do something different. And those are the types of things that we can hope for, because as one of the earlier speakers said, these are the people, they're our future. They're taking care of us down the road. And we have to have hope in them that they've been raised and have the right values and things that we need for our community. And through this program, they're getting a taste of that. They're understanding that there are other things out there. There are people in this world who care about them, who care about other people, who take care of things like that. And again, those things can't be measured. Ms. Reynolds talked about the academic success. We've been looking every year at this time of year, we're finishing up our SAGE state testing. And we've been looking at our data, and our data is looking really good this year. We've had great improvement. Our sixth grade, that's who all these students are, our sixth grade has more than doubled their proficiency scores from last year to this year.
Bravo.
That means double the amount of kids than last year. That speaks a lot to our teachers, but it also speaks a lot to our students. Their ability to learn and their dedication to their education and their learning. And a lot of that starts with the people in this room as well, who inspire them, them to take their education a little bit more seriously, having a relationship with their Rotarian. Maybe it inspired them to graduate from high school. Maybe it's to college to pursue an engineering degree. Whatever that is, there's an inspiration there. And it's created through that bond and that relationship that's established. It's been roughly 40 weeks that you've been coming for this school year and spending with these kids. That's 20 hours. And that's irreplaceable in their lives, irreplaceable in your life as well. And I can only imagine that as the tutors, you know what I'm talking about and you recognize that. We have 40 more kids at school that would love to have a tutoring relationship with the Rotarians. So if you find yourself with the time, half an hour a week, we're pretty flexible on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think some come on other days as well, but Tuesdays and Thursdays are the most. If you have that availability, we would love to welcome you at our school as well. Thank you.
It's a humbling privilege to be with you today and share a few moments and a few thoughts and hopefully answer some questions if you have some. Mark said I could talk about anything I wanted to talk about today. And so when you've had me come in the past, there's been a little bit of a focus or a history on a specific way to maybe help young people or grow services that can break the cycle of poverty or do some other things. But today, he gave me free rein to kind of go down a trip down memory lane of my 13 and a half years in the district, express my appreciation along with Avery and Randy for your influence, talk about that influence in other contexts, and then mention a few things to pay attention to, because we live in an interesting time with some strange people trying to take us down some interesting paths. And so it's a good time to be attentive, and it's a good time to demonstrate the amazing civility and leadership that Rotary stands for, and to help elevate the conversation and change the trajectory for kids in the community. So also want to thank Mark in front of each of you for his years of service on the Board of Education. What a great leader and thoughtful advocate for the community. His wife, Lynn, I'm sure many of you know her, continues to people them things that they otherwise wouldn't be aware of without her influence in their lives. So you've heard a little bit about your role as a mentor, your role in service. I just mentioned a little bit about civility. Even though you torment each other a little bit, as I've been invited to these events over the years, nudge each other a little bit down more, nudge each other to go ring a bell somewhere or to do volunteer work or pay fines. Still don't get the fine structure thing, but really the centering of the history of the organization, being the 24th chapter in the world of an organization that's roots are on the four-way test. And for the kids who are here today, the four-way test of a Rotarian is they want to make sure that whatever activities they're involved in, that the first thing is that it represents truth, that it is truth and that it is defensible, that it's identifiable, that it means something. The second is that it's fair to all concerned, so that somebody doesn't have to lose at the expense of somebody winning. The third is, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Man, the world is a little short of goodwill and good friendships right now. And yet you look around this room and again you see the pleasant interactions and the looking forward to see each other once a week to share in a social experience that's also connected with work and life and everything else. And the fourth test is, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Will it actually help and make a difference? So let me talk about my 13 and a half years in Salt Lake City School District, some of the overlaps with your great service and mentoring, and then looking ahead and answer some questions. So my journey, you heard a little bit, was here in the city, growing up in the city, then working in Granite School District for 27 years, and then being hired to become the superintendent in Salt Lake District. And I just came out of a role in Granite District where I was assistant superintendent over everything I've complained about for my career before that period. And as I went through the process of interviewing, it was a rough time for Salt Lake City School District. There had been some school closures, there was unrest with the teachers union, there were quite a few battles going on politically and in other ways. And as I neared the process, the next to the last interviewing experience was held in a local hotel with the current Board of Education and a couple of new board members that have been elected in this very difficult election season over some of these contentious issues. And so as I come in as a candidate, you could kind of cut the air with a knife and that experience because the current board, being very thoughtful and caring, wanted to open up the interviewing process to the new board members, even though they hadn't participated up to that point in time. And one of the current board members turned to me, and those of you that know me well know that I really like sarcasm, and I shouldn't, and it works really good with most teenagers, but occasionally it doesn't. And in this interview, my answer was just a smart aleck, and it must have worked. Because the question I was asked by this current board member was, now, Mr. Withers, you know that this school district has never hired anyone that hasn't been a successful superintendent in some other school district first. And what's the dumbest thing you could say to that in terms of the form of a question? I said, well, how's that working for you?
Astute.
So I made it to the final round of interviews. The final round of interviews were more like a Senate hearing than interviews, as public were involved, other people are involved, and you know, as you take over a new assignment, that people sometimes joke and talk about how there are skeletons in the closet. Well, man, these skeletons still had flesh instead of hair. It was an interesting experience. And so the board that hired me is different than the board I started to work for just a couple of months later. And for those of you that paid attention, the average tenure of an urban school district superintendent in the country is a little less than 3 years. And so people were pretty sure that I wouldn't make it more than 2 because the state law, I'm a publicly appointed official by the 7 elected board members, and those are 2-year terms. And so people were pretty sure it must make it 2 years because they committed to pay me for 2 years. So I'd probably make 2 years in that assignment and see what would happen from there. But my whole career, as you heard, is work with young people that the system hadn't seen very well. And so I never intended to be involved in leadership or alone a superintendency. I joke sometimes about superintendents I've met that know all the answers. Those are the people you should be afraid of because it is a human enterprise. The answers change. The skills, the talents, the needs change over time, and that's a great thing to be able to recognize those kinds of things. So as those first couple of years unfolded and you stay focused on kids and you start looking at what's going on in the schools, you find that schools don't really have annual plans. Well, you find there's a new federal law called No Child Left Behind. The law actually was pretty good. The stories around it were incredible and not very accurate. The regulations could have been changed a lot because there were onerous kinds of language and consequences mixed in with those. But a few years into that journey, again, how you vote matters. Think about the people that represent you. Sometimes they get caught in certainly don't. Early on in the No Child Left Behind era was we're just going to turn all of the federal money back to the feds. So in a highly impacted school district, you were talking about poverty a little bit earlier, 60% of kids in Salt Lake City between east and west side live in poverty. Some of the schools on the west side of the district, the poverty rate is over 90%, meaning qualifying for free and reduced lunch or being at a rate where having access to just basics really doesn't always happen. This is very important for a Title I school because the elementary federal law that child name, it's still the same core law, was the war on poverty back in the 60s. It's a compensatory and compensating poverty. And so federal money back. So where did the federal money come from? It's kind of like, you know, we sent that there and to not have it come back would kind of be a dumb thing, elected official. Let's think about this for a minute. And so that rhetoric escalated and the legislature was on the verge of refusing to accept federal Title I resources. I had a chance to meet with Secretary Spellings at the time in the Bush administration. She had heard this weird guy from Utah wanted to meet with her a little bit because it was connected through what was called the Council of Great City Schools, which is an organization that represents large school districts and school districts from capital cities in each of the states. And so I was granted an audience with Secretary Spelling for about 10 or 15 minutes in a hotel back room one day with security and stuff around because, again, you can't trust a guy from Utah. They might have some weird questions to ask. And so I go to Secretary Spelling and I said, Secretary Spellings, I know you're aware of what's going on in my state. And I said, is there any way that Salt Lake City could be considered like Guam or Puerto Rico because they're crazy? Because Salt Lake City cannot afford to lose resources to serve young people that live in poverty. That to politicize this is just not helpful at any level. The rhetoric is destructive. It brings the worst out in people in debates. And it's not about thoughtful engagement in policy and service to kids. She started laughing. I guess she doesn't usually hear things that are kind of funny, like the city of Salt Lake becoming viewed as Puerto Rico or Guam. But it was a serious request that if our state failed to recognize the flaws in that behavior, that there might be some way to not penalize the kids. So that's kind of the theme of my experiences over the years, is that adults sometimes forget that we're supposed to be helping kids, not creating additional barriers because we get politicized or are locked into arguments that aren't focused on the best interests of young people. And so we've learned a lot. Through those years, we're probably the only urban school district in the country that never had a school progress in the consequences of No Child Left Behind under program improvement. We outperformed similar demographics in the state by 8 to 10% after this 13-year trend. I view the world a little bit differently. Lots of people can make big splashes and lots of noise and pretend to make a big difference. But to me, it's the glacier that's really changed the landscape. Once they start, they can't stop. If you change the culture and empower parents and kids and communities, amazing things happen. Some of you have seen what occurs in our community learning centers where we connect early childhood education with clinic services and adult education. Some of you actually dig a little bit deeper behind the rhetoric and look at the data and recognize that regardless of the stories told, 2 of the last 5 years, the graduation rate for Hispanics from Highland High School was higher than that for Caucasians. But none of you heard that. You didn't read that. And those investments pay off and make time. You don't hear about what occurs when you start early on in a child's life. Some of my experiences, I was able to be a prevention trainer for the state of Utah, trying to help kids stay away from drugs, alcohol, stopping teenage pregnancies, gang involvement, and so forth. For a long time, my generation was trying to learn about those things. So I can remember back in high school, some weird things just related to drugs, to give you an example of the evolution of being smarter with the data and the information that's there. And so going to South High School during the time of the TV series Dragnet and some crazy movie called Reefer Madness and a bunch of other things that were designed to try and scare kids or people about staying away from drugs, the response of the educators was to do what? Build credibility back with kids. So I can remember my health class with a drug chart, 5 feet long, 3 feet high, every pill in the entire world on it. And guess what the outcomes are when you only give information? Triple the use of drugs in the teenage population in this country. Okay? Because kids didn't know that, oh man, this one will do that, and that will do that. Well, let's check that out. Let's see if you're serious about that. And there's a period of time that people would bring former abusers and users to do assemblies in school. What message is being told to kids? You can go ahead and party all you want and come back and they'll let you talk in the assembly. Okay? What's missing is if you only have good information and you don't couple it with a role model or real life experiences, the real good information sometimes gets lost. So what does Rotary do that ties those things together? You try and get good information with real people that care about kids. Kids can pick up on whether you care about them in a heartbeat. You know that as you've gone in and tutored in a classroom. Same thing happens with substitute teachers, regular teachers, and so forth. Thank heavens we only have a few teachers in the system that don't like kids, but the kids know they don't like them. And when a teacher loves kids and cares about them, they pick up on the academic message, but also the human message. Okay, another simple kind of evolution over time of how we got smarter, because prevention, at that point in time, for a number of years, I worked with the Kennedy Foundation. Eunice Kennedy Shriver is one of my heroes. Got to interact with her quite a bit. And the Kennedy Foundation was engaged in trying to prevent what was called, in old language, mental retardation or special needs or disabilities, particularly mental disabilities, for late age birth issues, and wanted to also stop teenage pregnancies, high-risk pregnancies. That's what the Kennedy Foundation started for. And so prevention related to what was called community caring around 5 core values of respect, responsibility, caring, family, and trust were based on our founding documents as a country of what you need for people to be free and collaborative and not try and hurt each other and make the place better when you're done. But not only did it stop teenage pregnancies, as I brought that model into the schools in Granite District where I worked, I found that if I got the model in place around those 5 core values with the adults, the kids are easy. It was about getting the adults to adhere to those values. And then had these incredible experiences like the Teen Parent Program, when we started to talk about those core values, they start to bring things back that they'd stolen from each other weeks earlier. I mean, that changes the perception when you have a responsibility to care about somebody else and that you're all in it together. So we now know that prevention of drug and alcohol use, prevention of gang involvement, prevention of suicide are all part of character development, emotional intelligence, and so forth. And it's a human endeavor. So it's not only academic, it's also social and emotional, and they have to be combined. So you have to have schools that integrate the arts and the sciences and not just focus on test scores, or guess what? Your test scores will actually go down. Think about it in your own mind. If you narrowly focus on something less complex, that's less relevant to your real world, your performance will go down. But if you focus on things that are broader that you might actually be interested in, they start to make connections. That's why your volunteering and your interaction with kids, whether it be just a few minutes every once in a while, makes a difference, but you have a tough time measuring on a piece of paper because it impacts the emotional intelligence and the academics over time. And most teachers stay in teaching because it's 3 or 4 years after you had a kid that you were sure never listened to you, never wanted to be in your class, was maybe disruptive a lot. They come back and stick their head in your doorway. And yeah, the first thought you think is, I hope they don't have a weapon or something. Right? But they're coming back and they're actually trying to tell you thank you. And once you recognize why they're coming back, that's why you stay in teaching, because you see the influence you have. That's probably why you volunteer. You see the influence over time in school that changes in the lives of a young person. And those changes go on lifelong. And so prevention connects over time. Investments in early childhood education are critical. So as you look ahead, not only is it important how you vote, but you be the reasonable voices that speak up and just ask people every once in a while to knock it off. I mean, really, come on, let's not fight over standards that make sense because you think there's a political agenda behind standards that make sense. There's really nothing wrong with having high standards for all kids to be competent in literacy and math. That's not a political agenda, and it is okay. And the curriculum will always be controlled locally. It's not like there's this grand plot that's out there, and we miss these little things that sometimes could help us look a little bit deeper and further into the things that are around us. So you model that. Your 4-way test focuses on it. Your desire to make the human conditions better in all the groups that you work with. Expect those other nonprofits that you work with to grow up and get out of their silo and work with others, because they can leverage far more together than they can do independently. Encourage them to just take a deep breath and be thoughtful. Encourage the elected leaders to stop trying to create barriers to answers and just own it. It's okay. It's okay to speak honestly about things that matter. It's okay. We all make mistakes. It's okay to compromise. When did compromise become a bad thing? It's just fascinating how many things can be solved when your focus is just on kids. So I promised to answer a few questions. I know we're almost out of time, so I'll take one or two questions. I want to make just a couple of quick final comments. Yes, sir.
I'm curious, what's your opinion of the growth of private schools versus public school and their academic level of accomplishment?
Okay. Private schools are different than charter schools. So charter schools as public schools, overall, as you measure their effectiveness, are actually less effective than a neighborhood school. However, you have really, really great charter schools, and you have really, really bad charter schools, and that's why overall they're about 17% less effective than a neighborhood school. But the real challenge is that the charter school movement was intended to try and breathe some creativity and some flexibility into the system. But what has occurred is the way the charters then get marketed, they're actually creating resegregation of communities and schools throughout this country. It's horrible. It's horrible because you'll see people overinterpret what the charter says, and choosers are more involved in the school than non-choosers. So if you're a parent and you go to a charter school where you're receiving less quality teaching from that school, you don't notice it because you chose to go there. You're more involved, you care about it, and so forth. One of the things we do terrible in the public schools, particularly in the high mobility schools, it's all in the front office. A charter school will welcome somebody like they're the new customer of the day, and a highly impacted, highly mobile school in the impoverished areas, please sit down, I'll be with you in a minute. I mean, those are simple things that we could do better and make a difference. Other questions real quick? Yeah.
Do you have an opinion, and if so, would you care to share it with us, about whether your opinion about refusing federal money for education might apply to refusing federal money for Medicaid, for example?
Totally applies. Makes zero sense. And most people don't understand that what we're really talking about, because the structure behind what was intended to happen, most people never take the time to learn and understand what it meant. It said the highest need population in your state should be your responsibility because you have ways to work with religious organizations, social organizations, so forth, that deal with the highest need population. And that's what gets called the donut hole, the missing group that hasn't been served, because Medicaid expansion doesn't go up, it comes down to the ones that should be served first. And you don't hear that. So yes, it's a terrible mistake that we turn back millions and millions of our own dollars, failing to serve the neediest parts of our population because it's misinterpreted and misspoken about as though it's an expansion to include other people that then won't participate in our economy. I mean, isn't it fascinating how language misleads the truth so easily? Yes, sir.
Repeat that.
The question was, are there other tutoring programs and so forth that work with schools? Probably the most common across the state is Read Today, and so they're often connected loosely originally with the governor's office, currently KSL and some other groups, and so they'll help with Star Reading program and some other things. But again, there's misapplication. I have so many simple examples. I know we're out of time, and you're so patient to spend time here every day. Yes, ma'am.
Would you comment a little bit on Common Core?
Yes. Yeah. So Common Core is fascinating. All the baggage with the language, right? Yes. What is it? All right. Their core standards in math, developed by thoughtful groups of people. And you want to be numerate, these are things you ought to pay attention. Oh, but it must have all these special strings attached to it. Well, it's done by the governors and the chief school officers across the country. Never came out of the president's office, never came out of a political background, but it certainly gets talked about that way. Yeah, and I was hopeful that John Benning would be here today because just that little journey over time. Those of you that know John, he's very thoughtful and stays engaged and helps identify kids and helps them into college and so forth. But when they did my open house back in 2003, he was in that group that didn't think I'd last 2 years. And that open house and he just looked at me, smiled and laughed. And those of you that heard John's laugh, you know, it's an interesting laugh. And I was going to pick on him. So as you see, John, please pick on him for me because 13 and a half years later, I'm still alive and walking and taking nourishment because I stay focused on kids. And that's what you do, and you do so well. And so it reminded me of a quote in closing, and that was from Margaret Mead. And she just said, never doubt that a small group of committed people can change the world, because indeed it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you for letting me be with you today and for all you do for our kids and families.
Thank you so much. I'm glad I live in the Salt Lake City School District. That was great. So our next meeting is Tuesday, May 31st.